Hey everybody, my name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on guests that are real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their community that educate, entertain, and inspire all things real estate on how you can take your company to the next level. So on today's show, I have Eric Parrow. Eric and I randomly connected on Facebook about maybe it was about a year ago, Eric, but I remember I had posted something on one of the Facebook groups on real estate, and Eric commented and said, "How can you do this? Can you do this? How is this possible?" And I remember from there, we connected. Super smart guy, knows what he's doing. He actually runs two operations. One's in Oklahoma, and then the other, he does investing in Pensacola. He works both markets, which is really unique. I mean, people in the Florida market don't really know a lot of people that invest in Oklahoma and the Midwest. So he brings a unique edge to the differences in both markets, and he can see what's happening. And Pensacola, many investors are in the Miami area, the Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, but very few do we know in the Pensacola area. So he has a wealth of knowledge. I've reviewed a lot of the stuff. We've talked backstage, and he's going to really dive into a lot of these topics. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, Al, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on here. You're right. It's a kind of interesting story behind how I got involved in both those markets, and I'm sure we'll end up diving into that. But thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hey, when we first connected, I had a feeling I knew where you were going with this stuff, and you know your thing. And I know a lot of the topics we're going to talk about today with you include leveraging your money. If you could do the deal with zero out of pocket, basically you have infinity return on your investment, and shifting strategies as you go. So we definitely want to dive in all of that stuff with you. But before we do, we got to know Eric Parrow. We got to know where you were pre-real estate, where you are now real estate. So tell us a lot about what were you doing beforehand? When did you dive in, and where are you today?
So I'm here in the Oklahoma area, and I started out when I was a teenager in Stillwater, which is about an hour north of Oklahoma City. Moved down to Oklahoma City, and I started my career as an IT professional, and I thought it would end up being a full-blown, lifelong career. I really loved being in IT. Started out usual working on computers and whatnot. Moved into network administration, setting up the servers and the backups, and just everything involved with computers. And then I got into web and graphics, and I worked for an oil and gas company, and I thought that was going to be my career, right? That's how I identified myself. In 2008, the very famous real estate crash happened. So when I was 22, I had bought my first house, and I was dating a girl at the time, and I wanted to upgrade to my dream home, a nice brick home, about 1,800 square feet. And so this was right at the end of 2008. All of 2008, for about 6 months, I had been looking for a new property, making offers, and nothing happened. So I finally got to this one, and I think I made the offer right at the end, like December, almost around Christmas time, and I got accepted. Like, I walked in, made the offer immediately, over asking price in the middle of a crash. But we haven't really felt it here a ton, so it still felt like it was a pretty good deal. Because of that, so we started kind of noticing that the crash was really kind of sinking in a little more. And I had this house that I bought when I was 22. Now, mind you, this was about 5 or 6 years later, right? So when I was 22, I bought this house. I paid $60,000 for it, and it had gone up to maybe a $75,000 or $80,000 value at the height of the 2008 market. I didn't want to lose the equity in that house. And so after I moved into my new house in January of 2009, I decided to finish touching up the rehab work on this little 1,000 square foot 3-1 and put it out on the market for rent. It was a very stressful time in my life, because now all of a sudden I had 2 mortgages to pay for. And you get that overlap right there at the beginning of the first, or the first month of the mortgage, where you don't have 30, had 30 or 45 days where you don't have to pay. And so I had basically that amount of time to get the rehab finished and put it out there and get it leased. So that was my startup.
What did you think when you were first starting out? Because I remember we were going through some of the notes that you had. What were some of the initial hurdles that you kind of went through when first starting? I think you were talking about lending or finding deals or taking risks. What were some of those initial things that maybe if you look back on, you had great advice for somebody just starting out, but then you think about what you did, which now you tweak it to things you do today? What were they?
Well, there's probably a million things. So, there's a lot of fear going into this for me. Like I mentioned earlier, was the two mortgages. So getting a tenant locked up in that was a big thing for me. And I operated based out of fear. I thought if I was going to lose a tenant, then I would not be able to pay the mortgages very well, because I was kind of on the edge of being able to afford the new house, which is probably a mistake. I probably should have bought a little bit less, but I made it all work out. Then you need to kind of reach out and find some other people to get some advice and some help, some backup, somebody on your side to look over your situation with you and give you some feedback about what's going on. The next problem I ran into was finding deals. And so I went through a bit of a dry spell. I didn't have any real good contacts in the industry. And so I struggled a lot. I still thought I was going to have this career in IT, but finding deals was going to be the next big hurdle to jump on that.
So that's a great transition, because in our Florida community, a lot of us can't do deals without networking, being a part of the community, working with others, working with title companies, because it all comes together. And so, one of those things is really networking with a lot of people and being in front of as many people as possible, finding those deals. That's what everybody does at first, is find the deals, but eventually you network, or you're on social media, or you're just doing so much online that deals are then finding you. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I know you do have a lot to say about those things.
Yeah, for sure. So finding deals is definitely a hard part for a long time for me. I would drive by houses and see rehabs being done, or see a house that was vacant. And things have shifted a lot in the last decade as well, making it a lot easier to get a hold of owners and vacant properties and stuff, or at least they seem like they've shifted. Maybe the techniques were there all along, but I didn't know what bandit signs were. I didn't know what yellow letters were. I didn't know, there was no ringless voicemails back then. Zillow, it was barely a thing. Like they were just kind of coming out. I didn't have any access to MLS. So it was really kind of a mystery to me how to find my next deal. So I would network a tiny little bit and mainly just scour MLS and Zillow to find, cherry pick something reasonable. So after a while, I ended up visiting a local RIA and networking with a few people and getting a little bit of support, but I didn't really know who to trust. And I still kind of lived in my own little world. So I looked at a lot of deals back then, and I was scared to buy a lot of them. So we had plenty of things on the market that made sense. I just didn't go for them because I didn't really trust the system or the method that I had been working on. Fast forward a little bit later, 2019, I made a decision. I said, I'm going to try and do everything a little bit. I'm going to put myself in front of all these people that are doing business and doing deals, because the more people that know me, the more exposure I get and the more deal flow I get coming back. So in the beginning of 2019, after being 10 years in real estate, I actually joined up to kind of an entry-level mentoring program here in Oklahoma City. And in that program, I made better friends with an attorney, specifically the attorney that I'm going to use to do this probate case coming up. I met at least 3, if not 4 wholesalers that are fairly big time now that I've bought deals off of. I got advice from them. You're in this coaching class and they're sharing their advice on how they talk to sellers, right? And kind of some of the wording they use. So basically it really revolves around networking. Since then, I started putting my face all over Instagram on the 24-hour stories, which automatically posts to Facebook. I wanted to be in front of everybody as much as possible, many times every day, because I've gotten deals from that through Facebook. They might know some agents and stuff like that, but we might be the only person buying houses with cash or with something that looks like cash. And so when they're looking for a solution, or their friends looking for a solution, we might be the one person. If we don't remind them that we're that one person over and over and over every every day by being in front of them, posting stories, posting on our Facebook page, Instagram, etc., then they're going to forget. But as long as we're out there in front of them every single day, they remember. And so that's what's happened. I've had several deals come to me. Somebody reach out on Facebook and say, hey, my mom needs, or my sister needs. And I thought of you first because you're always posting these cool how-to videos about the rehab work you did, or jumping through a window that we took out, or doing some plumbing, or just being crazy and somehow memorable, and also associated with real estate on my social media.
Yeah, you've been really active on social media, Facebook, Instagram. You got your new YouTube channel that you're really promoting. So, in the world of the social media, the mailers, the marketing, what efforts, for people first starting out, or for people that have been doing it a while and want to tweak it and change it, or want to try something different? They don't like the cold calling, they want to try the mailers, or vice versa. What have you seen work for you with everything we have now? Phones, um, Zoom, Facebook, what works?
Well, it all works on different levels. For somebody starting out, you're definitely going to want to be the real estate guy in your network of friends, right? Start talking about real estate, that you're doing deals, that you're associating with people that are doing deals, that you're looking to buy. You're always looking to buy, always looking to buy cash, even if it's not something you want to keep. And I'm not saying lie and tell somebody you're going to buy with cash without having some kind of a plan to move it, right? But as long as you understand your market and you're putting yourself out there, and at the same time you need to be networking with potential buyers, then you can piece this together as a new person, especially if you're really trying hard and putting yourself out there. There's people like me that will see that. So I've gotten deals because I spent the time and connected with somebody instead of just rushing in and making an offer, right? And I think a lot of it's about that. But as far as what somebody can do, become known as the real estate person in your network of friends, because somebody somewhere is always watching, and they're going to have a problem themselves, or their friend, or their family member, or they're going to get something that gets passed to them through probate because somebody passed away. There's always activity going on. Even in the most stagnant markets, there's things happening, and you need to be known, the sooner the better, as the real estate expert, the guy that buys houses in your network of friends. That's probably the most important thing right off the bat.
Oh, I agree with you on that, Eric, because even in the market I've been in probate, I've hit it like probate, 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 probate. And I've realized that when you hit a niche and you hit a specific market, you become somebody that people come to. And so same thing for business like you in your real estate world. When you become the go-to person, people are going to come to you because you specialize in it. And a lot of people like that. They don't want the jack of all trades. They want people that are going to be specialized. And something that you had written down that we were going to talk about today, it's quite interesting. Pensacola is a unique area, right? You got the beaches, you're right near the Alabama, Mississippi's not far off. You're in a really interesting area where a lot of people from those states come to visit or buy secondary homes over there. You're in a really neat market. So yeah, please elaborate, because there may be investors that are in Miami that now want to go to like Pensacola and stuff like that.
Sure thing. So one of my things is I always try to invest in properties that fit kind of they fall right in the middle of people wanting to rent on their way up and on their way down. And by that, I mean, when the economy is good, sometimes people get better jobs, they can afford a little bit more. And so they might move from a cheaper or less nice rental unit into one of my properties. That's the market that I play in. And it typically ends up being, for me, it ends up being $60,000 to $120,000 homes just from where I'm at, right? So if you're in California or Miami listening to this right now and you go, you can buy a house for 60,000, you just got to understand this is the area, right? Where a nice home is 200,000 and a really nice home is 400. It's a $60,000 to $120,000 house is a pretty good house to live in when, a $200,000 house gets you 1,800 square feet, just, a 10-year-old house. So with that in mind, when I tripped into the Pensacola market, I compared it to Oklahoma City, and this is about 5 years ago. And I realized that the rents were almost on par with Oklahoma City, but the purchase price was significantly less than where we had gone in Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City's been increasing in price a lot for our market lately.
Something you mentioned before, you wanted to talk about that. If it's, something you would have told somebody when you first began your career, which was buy everything.
Yeah, buy everything. As long as the numbers make some kind of sense and they're not negative and you can make it work, buy it. And I try to qualify everything that I say, right? I don't just want to say just buy everything, but buy it if the numbers work and if you're in a market that will continue to grow, right? So you don't want to be in a market that's about to die, but as long as you're bringing in jobs, we kind of circle back to that. So as long as you're bringing in jobs, the economy is, and population growth and rents are going up, and the city has a good plan and good management, then buy it. As long as it cash flows and makes sense. We don't want to rely entirely on the value increase, equity increase, but that's part of the long game that we need to be aware of. And the more properties we have under our control, the sooner, the better we are in the long run, right?
Something we were kind of going over, we wanted to talk about were 3 things that are going to help take somebody's company to the next level. A lot of delegating, hiring assistants, and getting to talk with private lenders. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, people want to know those kinds of things. People don't understand the importance of hiring a VA or what they call virtual assistant, but people don't understand that you gotta shift out, you gotta outsource so you help yourself scale. I'm not the best one to talk about that because I need that myself. Right? Like, I'm getting to that point where I don't need to be doing the petitions and the probate stuff all the time. I need to be out there more, doing the presentations and doing what I do best. So talk to us all about, like, getting those things off and outsourcing.
For sure. So it's a big deal on where I'm at right now in my business. Like, just to put this into perspective, real estate isn't all kittens and fluffy things and everything that's nice, right? I stayed up here at work till 4 a.m. last night.
Wow.
And I've been staying up here till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock, a lot, because I'm just running out of time to get everything done in a day. And I'm at this point that it's critical for me to push past and hire an assistant, start hiring some VAs, but it's also difficult, right? So I'm at this stage, I think a lot of people are at this stage as well, where I'm so kind of overwhelmed and out of time. It's actually difficult for me to find the time to hire somebody and train them, but I really desperately need to do that. And then on top of that, it's a bit hard to kind of think forward far enough, because right now the cash flow from the company, I think if I hired a full-time assistant, I would essentially break even. So I don't typically take any money out of the company until this year, where I've been paying myself. I just don't. All my money goes into the company.
Right.
So I'm trying to find what things that are less important for me to do and easy to offload to other people. I'm trying to justify paying someone to do these things, right? So I'm not a shoot from the hip kind of guy. I have to make sure it makes sense, because it's difficult for me to give up that critical cash flow coming in. But I know it's gonna level up for me. It's gonna cause my business to level up, and we're gonna start doing more. I'm costing myself money by not being able to offload some of these other tasks and concentrate on the important ones like acquisitions. So that's what people really need to figure out, is how they're hurting themselves and how they can push past that. What things that they need to be focusing on priorities every day, like talking to banks or talking to private lenders, stuff that they have to do. So all these things that are out there that they're less important but still need to get done, and a lot of times they just get forgotten if I don't write them down or take a note somewhere in about 5 different places I take notes. So they get forgotten and put off, and it just slows everything down, and it costs me money. So right now it's just this middle block. I've got money in the bank and I could easily hire somebody. I just have to commit to training them and commit to having some kind of an employee. Like that scares me. I don't, I never thought I would be somebody with an employee of any kind, right?
Right, exactly. You never, I mean, you find out that you're running a business and it's just something that goes right over you and you're like, "Whoa, I mean, I wasn't even I don't know. You are trying, but you weren't even, you're just doing it. You're making things happen and I know what you mean. You should be doing things that you are better off doing and taking those miscellaneous or auxiliary things and getting a personal assistant or somebody to help you because you're getting bogged. You should be going to bed at like 12 o'clock, not 4 o'clock, right?
Maybe even
Um,
10.
yeah, maybe a 10 would be great, but instead of 4, but people don't realize that. And again, I'm offending that right now because I need to be doing that. I can't even get to all the things I want to do. So that's great advice for people. Eric, something that I know when we had talked about doing this podcast and bringing you on, I think we were just talking about like the different topics, and then we kind of dove into COVID and how things were playing out before COVID. And then March 16th, 17th hits, and all the lenders and all the hedge funds stop, and all the many contracts are canceled. People back out of their deals. And now you have to figure out a new system for yourself. How were you doing pre-COVID, right before it? And then COVID hits, things change. How were you flexible to yourself in the business? How did you mold and change, and what are you doing now that you weren't doing before?
Well, so pre-COVID, there's all these national lenders out there. Basically, Google for lending, and you'll come up with any number of them, right? All the big ones. They all advertise. So I won't name a specific one, but they're all offering, let's say, 80% loan to value, probably in that 6% range, 6.5% range on interest. Of course, they all have high fees and whatnot, but they would do that 80% loan to value. COVID kind of hit and they went from 80 to maybe 70 and then 60. And this was like from one day to the next. And this is all something we all know. Like when things get bad, lenders kind of shrink back fast. So from one day to the next, they drop 80, 70, 60, and then no lending. And the only thing they would offer is like a 1-year term at maybe 60% LTV with a real high interest rate. And it would be a balloon payment at the end of 1 year because everybody was scared. They didn't know what was going on, but they were still trying to offer something. But yeah, it was terrible. So that right there, that happened probably about 2.5 months after maybe 3 months after I quit my job, right? So when you have a day job and you have a W-2 and your finances are mostly in order and your credit score is good, you can do, as long as your debt to income ratio works out, you can do up to 10 at the time of this recording, and many years before, you do up to 10 conventional loans. So think of a conventional loan as like a mortgage you would get from a mortgage broker, right? So not having a W-2 job and this being the first year into self-employment, so to speak, lenders aren't going to loan money. Not only that, they even the mortgage brokers cut back a little bit. They changed their requirements, but either way, I couldn't get a conventional loan to save my life. And I was already at 9. I already had 9 of those conventional loans. So I had 1 left to go, but I have 7 properties that I want to refinance and was working on a refinance. And I'm very thankful that they cut their program right before I paid for 7 appraisals. So my whole point about this is when something happens, you've got to shift gears. And I know I haven't secured those loans yet, but I feel pretty confident it's going to happen. We're getting banks to do things that they really aren't offering. But part of what's happening is those banks are doing a lot of commercial lending to restaurants and hotels and shopping centers and strip malls and stuff. And guess what dropped out during COVID? It wasn't real estate. It was hotels, strip malls,
Commercial
and restaurants. They had no business. They couldn't pay their bills, right? So all of a sudden, those things looked like terrible investments to those banks. And all of a sudden, real estate was like, well, it's a little too small for us to be messing with, but it seems safe. So let's do it. Like my units are all occupied. My tenants are all paying. I stay on top of it. I reach out to my tenants, and maybe we get into this later, but I reach out to my tenants and see how their job is, see how they're, see if they're getting paid, essentially, if they have hours cut. Like I try to get out in front of that early on and let them know, I didn't commit to any specifics, but I said, hey, if you run into problems, reach out to me first and we'll see if we can work something out. They don't know this, but I was willing to, cut back the rent amount. If it all went real south, I was prepared to dial back their rent to just a little bit over what my, PITI, my principal interest taxes and insurance was, my payment on those properties. Because if everything does go real south, it's better to have somebody in that property that's, you already know, you just taking care of it, right? They're already a good tenant. You don't have to vet anybody. You don't have a vacancy. You don't have to try and find and fill that, right? Assuming maybe jobs just disappear overnight, I would rather keep it full at a lower payment than sit there vacant. Because later on, when you go and talk to banks, if you start missing payments or if you have a lot of vacancies, they look at that stuff. They look at your rent rolls and they want to know how well you did, how you survived. But anyways, I didn't have to cut any of those rent payments.
That's a great strategy, Eric. That's something that a lot of people, I don't know, maybe a lot of the investors thought about that when it was happening, but it's true. I mean, you trust the people that are in it if they're good tenants, back it down. At least it covers your overhead and your mortgage and insurance and taxes and utilities and all of that. Well, they're paying that, but that's a great strategy for people that if you're going through a tough time like that, it's important to dial it back down.
Yeah. And obviously that would have been an extreme measure. I had one tenant that had one slow month in the restaurant business. And so they actually reached out to a local charity in Pensacola. That charity confirmed that the tenant was going to be short that month. I filled out a form, they filled out a form, and the charity cut me a check. They mailed it to me. So I'm super grateful for that charity being there. I'm grateful for the tenant kind of reaching out to me and letting me know what's going on. And of course, I've had a couple that asked to pay late by a week. And I've as soon as they pay, so I always do this with them. I say, hey, you can pay late. We'll leave the late. Try my lease agreement doesn't really bill late charges. It gives discounts for paying on time or early. So it's only $50. And so I leave the charge on there, but as long as they are on time the next month, I credit that charge back. So I think all throughout this, I think I've left one charge on there. I've credited almost all of it back. In fact, I'm still thinking about crediting that last one back. They're struggling. I know they're struggling with their job, and I don't want it to be a burden. But there's a fine line between being a soft landlord and being a nice person, right? Like soft landlords get taken advantage of, and tenants will develop habits of wanting to pay late because they can get away with it. Some tenants are great. They don't lean towards those habits, and you can kind of tell when you interact with these people. So I try to strategize where that I still come off as firm, but kind and understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. You have to have a method to your madness and a strategy for what you do. And everybody's got a different way to do it. And you found a groove that works for you on this stuff. So it's super important. Another thing that I had asked was like, the biggest real estate myth. And I love how you said, going from homeless to a rock star, sounds so easy, right? Like it sounds super easy, but it's a lot of work. A lot of people don't know. I mean, that's a different type of mindset, right? That's the ready, fire, and then aim. Just do it.
So, and I'll let me put a little more detail into that, and then also reference that ready, fire, aim strategy when I got into the Pensacola market. So on that sheriff's sale deal, that really was ready, fire, aim, and I was super stressed out. I get very stressed out when I don't have any money in my bank account, right? So when I did that deal between the 401k loan, I maxed out my 401k loan. Like you can loan it to yourself and you literally pay yourself back into your 401k. So all the interest goes back to you essentially. So I maxed out my 401k loan and every penny I had in all savings, checkings, whatever I had, I would have had less than $800 left in the bank when I did that deal. That's stressful because a couple of bills come in, mortgage hits, and your check doesn't hit quite right at the right timing.
Right.
And you start bouncing stuff. So I will say this, I'm forever grateful. My parents loaned me $3,000 just temporarily so that I wouldn't bounce anything while I did that, basically to give me peace of mind.
Yeah.
I didn't spend any of their $3,000, but we put it in the account just so that I wouldn't bounce anything. And then as soon, 30 days later, the bank swept in, got me my money back. I started putting everything back where it came from. So I am grateful, and I know not everybody has that kind of a lifeline out there, but it was a very small lifeline, and it was really peace of mind. In the end, I could have survived without it, and I didn't know that they would offer that to me at the time when I made the deal happen. So I kind of went for it. Fast forward to Pensacola, obviously I'm not there full time, so I started relying on a friend of mine who's also a real estate agent, an investor, a handyman, rehab guy. Like, he does everything. He's like me down there. And so we got to the point where at this point I had enough money in the bank that I could buy with cash and then refinance later. And so we would start, the deals were so good down there that we got to the point I would talk to him about it. He would send me an address. I'd check it out, ask him if he's seen it. And usually within 5 or 10 minutes, he would talk me into, but I'd talk myself into making an offer, sight unseen. And these are deals out on MLS, so it's like a really good deal. You got to act super fast. So make an offer, sight unseen, and maybe at or over asking just a little tiny bit to get taken seriously. And then because it's on MLS, the contracts going out on those are always contingent on inspections, right? Which is the funny part. When I do wholesale deals, they're never contingent on inspections. If I put the money down, I put the money down, and I lose it if I don't take it. So we got into this system where we look at any pictures that were available, reach out to the listing agent if there was one, and then hit them back within 10 or 15 minutes of finding it with an offer, a cash offer, and going from there. Get it under contract, look at it. If there was something legitimately wrong, we would try and talk them down a little bit and adjust the price to reflect. But most of the time, we just ran with it because the deals were significantly better down there than up in Oklahoma. So all of a sudden, I was the out-of-state investor with a lot of money paying too much for deals compared to what people locally would. And here's something I want to get into, is this mindset. So I'm on both sides of the fence on this mindset, okay? So here in Oklahoma, we've had a lot of outside investors from the coasts come in, Oregon, Washington, California, New York. Literally, a guy from New York just bought. So we'll get back to that. So we have all these outside investors coming in, and they're driving the prices up. And we've been in this market for 10 or 20 years, right? Looking at whatever, we lived here, we grew up here in Oklahoma, whatever happens, and we go, man, that is not $100,000 house. I bought one just like it for $60,000 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, or 4 years ago. And so we get stuck in this idea that we just don't want to pay that for a piece of property because it's not worth that. But if that's what people are paying for it, that's the going rate. So we either have to shift strategy, or we just get left out in the cold, right? So I'm not saying do bad deals that don't make sense and don't cash flow. I'm saying find new ways to make it work. On the other side of the fence, now all of a sudden I'm the out-of-state investor in Florida, of all places, and I'm the guy looking at that market. There's a bunch of people in that market going, man, I wouldn't give more than $35,000 for that house, and I'm dropping 60 grand on one, right? Because they're still stuck in the value that they saw in the past, and they haven't compared it to other markets out there and how it matches up, even against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is still pretty conservative. It's not super high priced. You can buy all kinds of weird little houses under $60,000 here. So,
right.
But they get stuck in their world. They got blinders on, and they don't see what other people outside of their market see, right? I think the moral of this story is, when other people are doing deals, don't just write it off as a bad deal. Like, hey, they paid too much, or that was stupid move. It might be.
Right.
And maybe I am the idiot for paying too much for them, but I bought properties that cash flow and they've gone up in value, and I have more assets under my wings. So, I think that's the name of the game, is controlling more assets as long as they cash flow. So yeah, just re-strategize. Prices are going crazy here in Oklahoma. So re-strategize. What can you do? Can you sell it off as a owner finance deal and
Right.
get some of your cash back, take a $10,000 or $12,000 down payment and still get the cash flow? Like what different strategies can you use to keep moving, keep doing business, instead of just sitting there with your arms crossed going, oh, the market's too high, I'm going to wait for it to come back down?
Right.
Yeah, well, what if it doesn't?
I
What
just
if,
realized that was definitely one of the big points you wanted to cover, which was shift strategies as you grow, and find the right strategy that works for you.
yeah, honestly, it's all about shifting strategies. As far as shifting strategies while you grow, that's a little bit different, right? So when you first start out, and this is all assuming that, I don't know, right? Like, so sometimes I listen to podcasts and watch videos where we always assume something about the listener, either that they have money to invest or that they don't have money to invest. So I'll kind of categorize this so the listener knows kind of where we're coming from on it. Well, that's not me. But let's assume you have a day job, you're trying to shift into real estate, you have a little bit of W-2 income that works for you, and you can get conventional lending, right? You have a good debt to income ratio, you don't have a ton of debt out there. So let's say you can get conventional lending. So you start off your portfolio by taking those conventional loans, because typically those are going to be the cheapest money you can get, right? I don't know what the rates are currently, but they're probably in the mid fours. But more importantly, it's 30-year financing. So your debt service, your principal and interest payment, is probably the lowest possible on one of those 30-year mortgages. You can choose to pay it down faster at any time. Take the long money. It's stable. It's locked in for 30 years. Yes, interest rates may continue to drop, but if they go back up, you're locked in at a good rate, right?
Right.
You can always refinance later if it drops more. I mean, we do this all the time. We refinance as part of strategy. But
Right.
early on, cash flow is important, because when you have one rental and one rental goes vacant, you have 100% vacancy, right?
Right.
So you need that cash flow to build up some reserves. If you have 1 month of vacancy and your cash flow is super tight on a property, if you're only cash flowing $200 or $150, and you rent it out for a year and then you have a month of vacancy, there went a very large portion, and your rent's $1,000. Well, there goes 90% of your cash flow for the year. You just burned it up in a month of vacancy. Okay.
Right.
So high cash flow, I think, is super important to somebody in the position of they've got a W-2. It's not, they don't have tons of cash just laying around to go buy things. So they're buying on, a 30-year mortgage, and they have a little bit of extra income to kind of float things along, but not a ton. So cash flow is pretty important up front. So then at some point you get to a point where you have a little portfolio built up, and maybe not in Florida, but maybe the state that you're in, you can go to your local bank and they will look at your company and they go, hey, we see that you've got great cash flow. You're strong. You've got a strong base. They look at something called the DSCR. It's a debt service coverage ratio. And that is, let's say your principal and interest payment on a property is $500 and your rent's $1,000. That's a 2.0 debt service coverage ratio. It means you got twice as much money coming in as you got going out to the bank. They don't worry a whole lot about the taxes and insurance part, because they don't get that money. They worry about the money that they get. It's the debt service coverage ratio. Okay. So these local banks around here, some of them look at that and they scrutinize it a lot, and they want it to be as close as 2.0 to 2 as possible. They'll still work with you. You're down in the, your overall average is a little low, 1.8, 1.7, but you start getting down to that 1.4 range, where maybe if your principal and interest is 500 and your rent is 750 or 800, that's starting to get really skinny, and they don't look at that as a healthy company that can survive a little bit of a downturn, right? So you're looking to build a lot of health into your small business, so that when you go to the bank, you do have some money in the bank. You have a really healthy business that you've built, even if it's small, maybe 2 or 3 properties, but it's healthy, it can survive. And then they look at that and go, okay, you've done good with what you have. we will lend you some more, right?
Right.
Almost falls back to what are those called? Parables or whatever of anyways, that's a long time ago. I won't get the story right, so we won't go into it. But basically, if you can do good with a little, and typically banks will loan money to people that don't need it. They won't loan money to people that are desperate for it, right? So if you're desperate for it, if your business is barely hanging on, they're gonna be like, yeah, come back to us when you've restructured a little bit, sell one of those properties and change your debt service coverage ratio and get that figured out before, and then we'll loan to you. Well, you need them to solve a problem. It doesn't really work that way. So keep that in mind. But then as your business grows, you've got to look at where it's going. Can you do some skinnier deals? If you have, let's say, 10 rentals that are all real strong, they're the backbone, right? And you got those out on the conventional. And we're not going into tax structure and corporate protection or any of that stuff. We're just talking about the truth of how things happen in the real world, how I've done it. We put them on conventional loans because that's what we can get and that's how we can grow. We'll figure out the rest of it as we go. Okay. So I expect people to do this as well. I'm not saying to do it, just I know it's out there. So maybe you max out your 10 loans on conventional as an example. Right. And then you're like, hey, I gotta start doing different deals, but the money's going to cost me more. I've got to put them on 20-year or maybe in a 15-year note at a bank of some sort, or maybe this national lender is going to be at a higher interest rate in a 20-year AM, because if I want to lock in that 30-year AM, that amortization schedule, it's going to be like 8 or 9% interest instead of 6. So basically all that said, you might have to start doing some deals where the cash flow is less. You need to set a goal, set a threshold of what you're trying to not go below. And then sometimes you'll break it by $10, but right. Don't not do a deal because the cash flow is 190 versus 200. That would be a dumb move. Don't not do a deal because you've got to put an extra $500 on the offer. Like, don't be dumb. The $500 in the long run is not going to make one bit of difference to your overall strategy a year, 5 or 10 years from now, right? Because it all smooths over in time. So try and be smart about it. Do deals that still make sense, but they're a little bit skinnier. And if it's going to be a little skinnier, maybe look for other value in it. Is it going to go up in value a little bit faster than one of these other deals that was a home run making tons of cash flow, but maybe it's making cash flow because it's in a little bit worse neighborhood, and so you paid less and the rents are still good, but it's never going to be a really high performing house when you go to sell it. Like, it's just not going to sell high. But this other deal where you're making like $200 cash flow, maybe it does have the potential to really skyrocket as the market moves up. So trying to find the positives in something and see if it works with your overall strategy, right? So shift strategies, look for ways because the name of the game here, as I mentioned it before, is, to me, bringing on as many assets as fast as possible without sinking your ship, right? You can do it wrong and sink your ship. But if you can do it and it all makes sense and you change strategies as you reach new levels of cash flow, of net worth, of money in the bank, right? So there's different strategies you need to change as they happen. But the more assets you have, the more you're going to be worth, the more your net worth grows over time. And I don't know if you want to touch on that now. I think I had an example somewhere here.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, you had the one about the $100,000 and you buy one house, you have great cash flow. I mean, you had some great examples about cash flow and the power of leverage linked to an asset that cash flows and appreciates. You had some.
So I kind of put some notes down here, so I'll reference that a little bit. And this is going to gloss over a lot of stuff. Obviously, we won't get into every detail of this, but this is going to gloss over, some costs and some repairs and some whatever, right? But on the simple side of this, to kind of make a point, leveraging your money. So I hear a lot of people trying to get into real estate. They go, well, I've got 50,000 or I've got 100,000. What should I do? Should I just buy one house? And you'll see a dozen different answers. But the answer I like is find a way where you can leverage that against a certain number of properties. Let's pretend you're using conventional lending where you have to put 20% down. Again, this doesn't take for account some costs and prepaids on insurance and taxes and closing costs and stuff like that. But just for the sake of simple math, we'll say you have $100,000, and instead of buying $100,000 house, let's compare that to buying 5 and putting 20,000 down on each one of those. Okay. So you have a $100,000 house, you buy one asset. Let's say that asset rents for $1,000 a month, right? So this is just kind of general experience. In my world, that would be about right, about $1,000 a month, and taxes and insurance would probably end up being about $100 a month each. So we got $200 a month. So our cash flow on a fully owned, zero debt, $100,000 house is about $800 a month. And if I did my math right, if the house doubles in value in 15 years, which is a little bit aggressive, but let's pretend it does. If it doubles in value in about 15 years, you have a $200,000 house now, right? So you've gained $100,000 of equity. Over those 15 years, that $800 a month cash flow, assuming you don't raise rents, right? So we're keeping it simple. That $800 in cash flow every month after your taxes and insurance, it's going to be worth about $144,000 in your account. Again, I'm sure you can invest this in different ways as over the 14 or 15 years, over the 15 years, we're keeping it simple. All right. So you have a total of $344,000 worth of your asset there, right? The money that you put in, the equity that it increased to, the new value, and the $144,000 of which you spent $0 over 15 years, right?
Right.
So let's compare that to 5 houses. You buy 5 houses, you put 20K down on each. Now you have 5 assets. You've leveraged the bank's money, and their money is so cheap, and it's backed by the asset, right? So why not? And I'm not saying go get debt out there that isn't backed by something, but get debt that's backed by an asset that produces cash flow. That's the important part. So now all of a sudden we've got to calculate what our payment on that would be. So just from knowledge off the top of my head, because I've got houses like this, they would cash flow, let's say $200 each. We keep it really low, $200, right? So we're paying our taxes and insurance, we're paying our principal and interest. We've spent our $100,000. Fast forward 15 years later, we've got 5 assets, all of which we assume have doubled in value again. We've made really good choices on our neighborhoods. And now all of a sudden we have, if my math is right, $600,000 in equity. Is that right? So we got 5, we have the $100,000 we spent originally. So we got that $100,000 in equity, and then we have 5 houses that have doubled in value. So $100,000 in new equity on each one of those. So we have a total of $600,000 in equity. Okay.
Cool.
Not to mention, we've actually been paying down that mortgage for the last 15 years. This isn't included in the math,
right?
But we've been paying that mortgage down for about 15 years. So we've actually got more equity than that sitting in those properties. Now, cash flow is $200 a month, 5 houses, 15 years, be about 180,000. So it's not a crazy amount of cash flow difference, right? 144 to 180. We've got more assets to deal with and more tenants and more time tied up in this. But in the end, after 15 years with 5 houses, we now have $780,000 compared to $344,000. So that's more than double. And all we did was change our strategy on investing.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
I mean, hey, I like that strategy of if you can buy more homes that are not as expensive and you can really use the cash flow in there, you basically tripled your money. You definitely doubled your money actually. And you probably can triple it if you do it right too.
And it's a cascading effect, right? So if you only have one house that's 100,000 and like you're waiting to come up with more cash. If you're on an all cash system, you're waiting to come up with more cash to buy the next property. It's a really slow moving game, right? But when you have those 5, now you have 5, well, you hold them for 5 years. You've paid down the equity some. Let's assume they've gone up in value because you've invested in a good market where there's new jobs and new people come, my brain just went blank. You get the idea. There's new jobs, population increase, et cetera, right? So you decide hey, I'm going to keep investing in this area. It's good. Equities, values going up in this area. So now all of a sudden, let's say you refinance those 5 properties in year 5, and they've gone from $100,000 houses to 120. And it might be a little soon to refinance, but somewhere, you might be able to pull out another $100,000 out of those, right?
Right.
So between all 5 properties, If they go up 20, you pull out not only the percentage of the money, the percentage of the value that went up, but you also get to pull out that original $20,000 that you put down on. So you can actually get your original money back. And then, and your cash flow is going to go down a little bit. But you got to understand, when you do that, you're pulling your cash flow out up front. So it's very important to not go and spend that money, right? You don't pull cash flow out up front with a refi and then blow it on a new car. You take it and you invest immediately in a new cash flowing asset, right? So let's say you only pull out that original 20,000 out of each property. So now you've got your 100,000 again. What do? You go buy 5 more properties. Price has gone up, so maybe you only get 4 more properties out of it, right?
Right.
But the idea is you buy more assets. Those assets cash flow in a whole. When you average them out, you're still bringing in more cash flow every month. You have now more assets that will appreciate in value. Somebody else you talk to is going to say, man, you need to put those on 15 or 10-year notes and pay them down, because it's all about having, increasing your equity in the property and paying them down. Because when you have, by the time you get 50 and they're all paid off, it's going to be amazing. Right. Well, that's great. And that's what we talk about, shifting strategies, right? So this is your get started strategy. This is how you want as many assets as possible under your control right up front, because it's a time game. Right. Over time, those assets increase in value. That's how you build your net worth. One of the ways you build your net worth, right? So at some point, you will shift to a different strategy in there where you'll have cash flow coming off of these properties when you've done enough of them that you can just go buy one every 2 or 3, 4 months in cash.
Right.
Or you may choose to start paying down a property and paying it off every 3 or 5 or 6 months, right? So you're just shifting strategies to whatever fits your next goal. Right. But early on, acquiring properties fast that doesn't sink your ship is pretty important, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, all of this is so valuable though, Eric, because, a lot of people just dive into real estate and they think, oh, it's just going to be this wonderful thing. We're going to make a lot of money, but you really got to have a strategy to it. And this is how you do it. This is how you develop cash flow, right? Like, I don't do any investing myself. One day I will, but I like all the other stuff that I do. So it's interesting hearing it's not just buying a house. It's coming up with the strategy to buy multiple, finding it in a great area that's going to rent well, great cash value. And at the end, you're going to make a lot of money. I mean, good amount of money. You're going to have your hits, obviously, and overhead and all the other things you weren't expecting, and interest. And finding the take I get from you is the importance of finding a really good lender with really good interest rates that you're not going to take major hits on with interest and all the other little auxiliary things that come with it, but finding really good lenders, because it sounds like you like that strategy about you want to be able to borrow more money so you can do more of these projects, so eventually you can get the cash flow you want. So it's interesting hearing your perspective on this. Everybody's got a completely different strategy to how they do it, but that's awesome. I mean, that's
great. And being able to borrow money and leverage somebody else's money is huge in this business, whether it's bank or maybe private money, right? Private money for them as well.
Well, I tell you, we cannot go away from this conversation. You've been in it for quite a while, so we cannot go away without talking about the 7-party double close and the duplex on council, the craziest deal you ever had and the deal you walked away from. I like that I don't like that you had to walk away from a deal, but I like that you're willing to share that story, because a lot of people think that anything that comes across their table, they got to do, right? Like lawyers, it's like door law. Anything that walks in the door, they feel they got to do. It's not, you can't do it. You can't do everything, and not everything's going to work out. So you got to walk away from deals. And what do you know? Everything gets crazy. So tell us the story about the 7-party double close and the duplex on council.
All right. So the 7-party double close was a deal in Pensacola. And I kind of went into it because I don't want to turn something away that I think might be possible. Like I'll reach out and see if there's some way to make something happen, even if it's not something for me. So a wholesaler that I know in the Pensacola area reached out to me and said, hey, we've got this, I think it was an acre or 3/4 of an acre of land. right in this nice area of Pensacola. There's a old beat up house on it, but really this is a land value thing. And it's zoned HDR. I believe it was HDR, high density residential. Okay. So it's a little different. A lot of stuff's zoned MDR, medium density, but it's high density. So basically, the little bit I could understand about it was they could put duplexes or quads on the property up to so many units. So right off the bat, there's a little bit of value in that. They had it locked up at, I believe it was 25,000. I didn't know what price they had it locked up at the time, but they were offering it to me for 35. I didn't have anybody specifically to take it, but my agent was pretty well connected. He'd done a lot of property management for people in the past, and he had just a different network of people than I did. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, do you know anybody that can move this? He said, you know what? Let me ask my broker. So he asked his broker, and she had someone ready to go, chomping at the bit. She actually had two people chomping at the bit to buy properties zoned like this. And so in throughout all of this, I found out that the guy I know that reached out to me was actually JVing the deal from a wholesaler. So we have the seller, the wholesaler, the JV, me, my agent, his broker, and then the buyer, right? So we got 7 parties. And the tricky part in all of this was that I believe that we started, I'm trying to think on this, we started this deal at one title company, and in the middle of it, we moved it to another title company that the buyers wanted to use. So we had to shift title companies. I actually paid the original title company because I know the person there. I paid them for some costs they incurred on the deal, I believe. I might be getting 2 deals mixed up. We're doing a couple of different deals at the same time. So we moved it over for the sake of simplicity. I double closed on it in the middle so that the buyers, it would be a little bit more blind to the buyers and the sellers, so they wouldn't kind of cross paths. Sometimes title companies put other people's, the buyer's information on the CD and the seller's information on the CD, and they shouldn't be seeing that because it'll make them mad. But so I double closed in the middle, which means in Florida, at least at this title company, they wouldn't let me double close without bringing transactional funding. And so I had to bring my $35,000 to the table, wired it down there, did the deal. For sake of simplicity, we set aside, I don't know if this is legal or not, so I don't know what I should say, but we basically set aside the JV guy and my agent. I think the way we ended up doing the paperwork is all above board, but we didn't want it. We didn't want the title company having to handle all that. So agreements were in place and we set those guys aside. So it ended up closing as a 5-party deal. I double closed in the middle. So A to B, B to C, I'm C, C to D, with the broker getting their cut on the C to D side. It worked out. Everybody was happy. I got a notice in the mail about a month later from city services saying that I needed to mow my lawn and cut down a bunch of trees and get rid of the house. And I called them up and I said, I only own that for about 5 minutes. Here's the people you need to talk to. But they were going to pull that house off of that lot anyways and build, so it wasn't a big deal. But so yeah, so it's kind of a crazy thing. It was a lot of most of it was trying to visualize in my head how I was going to pull it off and what paperwork needed to be in place and keep that chain of this person agreed with that person to do such and such. Where does that leave me? When a contract gets assigned, I pick up the rights of the original buyer, the wholesale guy that signed the contract. So I actually think there's some gray zone in there. Like when they assign their rights to me, I actually think that I can make modifications to that contract. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think so because they've assigned all of the rights of the contract, at least the way this was written. It didn't matter, but I learned a little bit, like thinking through all this, I had some realizations like how some people's assignment contracts probably assign too much of their rights forward. Anyways, I don't know. You're the lawyer. You would know more about that.
Now, know that if you do a contract, you could probably put a clause in that the originator of the contract is the only one that was able to make any modifications, and any assignee or subsequent assignees shall not be allowed to modify without the original person agreeing.
There you go. And that paragraph was missing.
I
And so,
guess.
see, yeah.
I mean, now you know what to do if you were the one originating it, right? I mean,
Exactly. But anyways, it was neither really here nor there, but it was just a realization I had in the middle of all this. It's like, wow, they're actually handing off power, but we do the deal
right.
in good faith. Everybody, honestly, most of the stuff all happens in good faith. And we have contracts in place, but we really abide by almost like gentlemen's rules of not going behind each other's backs or screwing things, because contracts are never perfect. They never cover everything. But anyways, we got the deal done. As far as I know, the buyer's happy. The seller was super excited. Apparently she had gotten those notices to clean up the property and couldn't. And so she was super excited to move it off of her responsibility list. And it was a win-win for everybody. I made the least amount of money in that deal.
Wow.
The B and C side of that, or with the JV guy, they split a $10,000 fee, or whatever the correct term is on that assignment cost. My guy, so when he marketed it, I wonder how much I shouldn't say on this, but when he marketed it, he bumped the price because he knew more or less what the lot was worth. So we agreed to split that. And then when I started incurring some fees on the double close, I ate all those fees out of my portion. So he actually made more than I did. I think the broker took $1,000. So the broker made the lease, but I made the second lease. So all the broker did was literally make the connection. So that was kind of the craziest deal.
And the one on duplex, what was that one about? The one that you walked away from? So backing up on the 7-party double close. So are you basically saying that there were 3 or 4 like assignment deal checks? Like when the title company basically closed the deal, every A to B. So A made an assignment, B made an assignment, C made an assignment. I mean, that's crazy. I mean,
so that's why we took out one person off each side, right? So I had a really great trust relationship with my agent on my end, my side of it, that made the connection for me. And then the JV guy had a trust relationship with the wholesaler. And so to keep the paperwork a little more simple at the title company, we took those guys out of the checks being cut by the title company, and we took care of them outside of that, right? So out of whatever fees I got, whatever fees the wholesaler got, we split that off to them. So, and honestly, on that side of it, that was all gentleman's agreement. They didn't have anything in writing for that. Thousands of dollars on the table, and then they didn't have anything in writing. So, I think a lot about this business is having a good reputation, right? I would never screw somebody and risk a reputation over any amount of money, honestly. So, and when you start working with people, they start to understand that, up front, everybody's nervous about working with everybody, but that's another one of the things, one of the reasons I like to be out on social media so much, right? And my face in front of everything, because it gives me that reputation going in. Honestly, I've had people say stuff like, "Oh, I've been watching your videos for years now." And I'm like, wow, I never would have thought somebody I've never met before.
Right.
I guess we're just Facebook friends or something, right? So,
right.
So I want my reputation to be out there, and I want them to know that I'm out there so much. I would never, do anything to risk my reputation either. So, kind of gives me a lot of good faith going into deals with people. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, your reputation is everything in the industry. And not only that, being consistent, following up. You could do I mean, I do videos. I post them once in a while. I was lazy all week. But the one thing that you do is you need to follow up, because you could be amazing at doing videos and marketing. But when finally somebody reaches you, you got to get that thing done. Like, or I mean, really be upfront with them, follow up. I mean, same thing with me. I mean, you're telling me, hey, Al, we got to probate. I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'll call you back. I'm on it. You got to follow up. You got to be on it. And either it works or it doesn't, you move on. So being in that industry, that's all reputation. I agree with you on that all the way. You got to follow up and be consistent in what you do. Everybody can see right through that, and they'll never tell you that you weren't. So
you just stop hearing from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So you really got to know what you're doing. So talk to us also about the deal you walked away from. That's a big one, right? Like you don't ever want to walk away from a deal. It's hard to find a deal as it is, but like what was what was the duplex on Council that you walked away from?
Okay, so the duplex on Council, I don't know how much of this detail I'll divulge, but essentially there was an agent involved and he brought me this deal and it looked like a pretty good deal. I'll really explain this one. It ended up needing to have a roof claim on it, and it ended up getting so messy with the seller that didn't really, they were kind of an investor. They had like one or two properties and they were just kind of dumping this. And they they got kind of cranky, but I'm still to this day not really sure how the deal fell through. But at some point we had some issues with a public adjuster trying to interact with the agent and me and the seller, and everybody kind of got cranky with each other somehow, and they wanted to back out. They'd signed the contract to do it, and I don't, it was an MLS contract or real estate agent contract, so I don't really know how binding it was, but I could tell that they just didn't want to move forward with it. Like they were frustrated about something, and so instead of trying to push them and hold them under contract and make them sell to me, I let it go. They asked to be out or said they wanted out or something, and we ended up letting it go. So sometimes it's just, I'm not in this business to crush anybody's soul, right? I'm not trying to steal their house, crush their soul, make them do a deal that they don't want to do or they're uncomfortable with. So I know a lot of people will try and squeeze on somebody, but that's just not my thing. I want to feel good at the end of the day, and I'll push back if I think somebody's trying to screw with me a little bit, but I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to take something from somebody that they would feel wrong about giving up and I would feel wrong about taking, right? If we
Right.
come to an agreement on something and they're good with it and they move forward, then I'm happy, right? I'm solving a problem for them, providing them a solution, but I want to have a clear conscience at the end of the day. A different deal I wanted to talk about was, and this one goes on, I think this is where my reputation could have been at stake, right? So it was a different duplex, and I got the email from a wholesaler, and I kind of glanced at the numbers real quick, and I was so hungry for a deal. I hadn't had one in a little while, so hungry for a deal. I was trying to break out into a different part of the city, different neighborhoods, and kind of expand my mind and be willing to take on different, basically just shift and change. So this is an older construction duplex, very small, and I was in a hurry to go somewhere. In fact, I actually remember what it was I looked at it super quick, and my buddy, this is like the middle of the afternoon, just back when I still had a day job, middle of the afternoon, and my buddy was like, "Hey, I'm taking the boat out." It was probably a Thursday or something, I'm taking the boat out and to this private lake. Do you want to come surf? So big thing I love to do is wake surf behind a wake boat, right? So it's no line. You throw the line back to the boat and it just makes this little 3-foot wave, and it's an endless wave, and you surf behind it on a short surfboard. I love doing that, right? And so he didn't have anybody to go out and I didn't have a boat, so we usually try to meet up, right? So I was in a hurry. I drove by the house on the way to the lake, literally just glanced at it. I was like, yeah, it's a little rougher than I was in, but it's okay. The pictures look good. I'll take it. So it's kind of on me. I didn't really sit down and look over the details. There's no laundry room in the house, in the duplex, on either side. So there's no place to even try and put a laundry unit, wash and dryer. No central heat and air. I totally glazed over that right off the bat. Like I drove to the front side and I didn't see any window units, so it didn't click, right? It had new electric panels, so that was a big deal. I was focused on. Right? I was like, oh yeah, new electric panels, blah blah blah. Floors look pretty decent. Walls look okay. So I didn't do what I always do and really kind of focus on some of the basics. Hit the key points real quick. Does the heat and air work? How's the roof? How's the I never thought that it wouldn't have a laundry unit in it because I've never bought an old 1920s house before, right? So I go to the lake, And I'm sitting there, and I've already told the seller that I would buy it. I already told the wholesaler I'd buy it. I take it verbal. And I'm back on the boat from surfing, and I'm like, wait a second, I don't remember pictures of a heat and air unit. And I go back and I scroll through my phone, and I was like, there's no heat and air unit, there's window units. I was like, well, where's the laundry? No laundry pictures. Where's this? Where's that? Like, I'm scrolling through this, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I was so focused on going to surf, and I was so hungry for a deal that I agreed to buy a deal that I didn't want. It's kind of in a older, rundown part of the city near some of the hospitals. So there's potential for this property in the future. There really is. But currently it's the kind of tenant that, you know, landlord pays for the water. It's the kind of tenant that pays in cash if they pay.
Right.
They were paying like, you know, $400 a side or less, and that included the water. And it was just, the numbers were skinny. Well, I closed on it because I told them I'd close on it. So I did. I bought it. I didn't want it even before, literally immediately, buyer's regret. And I bought it, whatever. Got the loan on it. I think it was 51 or 52,000. Fast forward about a month and a half, the previous owner tried to come and collect rent from one of my tenants after I collected rent, after I bought it. And he started yelling at me on the phone. He's like, well, that's my money. And I said, no, it's mine. I bought the place. It's my money. I'm collecting rent. He's like, well, yeah, but that's for and it was the previous month. He hadn't collected rent for the previous month. And I said, look, man, I don't know how you do it, but I collect rent on the first of the month, not on the last of the month. So if that tenant owes you something for previous month, that's on you. You're going to have to figure out how to collect that from them. But any rent money going forward is mine. He wasn't happy. But anyway, so about a month and a half later, one of the tenants they had just moved in. It was advertised as a one side vacant when I got it. So I was going to do rehab on it. When I got to see the property, finally, he had filled it with somebody without any kind of a background check. That guy moved out a month later. He was super nice, but whatever. He moved out a month later. He had an opportunity for a better place. And then the other tenant basically came up short and got really aggressive with me. It was a very small, short girl, but she was just like super, like wouldn't let me talk, wouldn't let me tell her. And at one point, I just got tired of it. And I had the notice to post on the door, you know, you're 5 days late, whatever. And I was trying to be super nice about it, give her some time to pay, talk to her. I want to have a conversation with her. And she just started running her mouth at me. And at some point, she just looks at me and goes, well, how long do I have? And I was like, well, this is your 5-day notice. She goes, I got 5 days. I said, yeah, you got 5 days. 5 days till we file in court, or, you know, right, until we start the eviction process. She wouldn't shut up long enough for me to tell her how the eviction process was going to work. Well,
she found out.
I assumed she was staying there. Like, I thought she was going to try and get some money and pay and whatever. She disappeared in 5 days.
Wow.
Like, what? So this all happened right at, I don't remember the exact timing on it, but it was a little weird because I had actually posted it for sale, and one of my wholesaler buddies decided to buy it off of me, different wholesaler. So we were under contract. They've been by to look at it a couple of different times. They're happy with it. They were ready to go on it. They saw a different value in it than I did. And it wasn't, so all my other tenants pay on Cozy, right? So they pay electronically online, automatic payments. That's my tenant profile. I got rid of it because it didn't fit my tenant profile. I did not want to have to go and collect cash every month. So then right at the end, she's freaking out. I'm like, whatever, we'll get it figured out. I'll get her back in line. You know, we'll get her paying rent. They go over there to look at the property one more time. They're like, hey, dude, your property's vacant. I was like, okay, is that good or bad? Like, I really didn't expect it to be vacant. I expected her to be there. We can get her back on track. He's like, well, that's better for us. We're going to rehab the whole thing anyways, so it saves us from having to kick her out. I was like, great, let's move forward.
Yeah, for sure.
So the funny part was she cleaned the place and even mopped and bleached the floors for me. I was like, she wouldn't shut up long enough to listen to me explain the process, because I never want anybody to be in the dark. I'm never trying to screw anybody, whatever. I want to give them opportunity to make right, you know, get back on their feet, whatever. She just wouldn't shut up long enough to hear what the process was. Yeah. So she just assumed that she had to be out in 5 days. So she left. I was just mind blown by that. I was like, whatever.
Yeah, some do. Some get the point and know they have to leave. What do they call it? In broom swept condition. Make sure it looks nice, and that you're not going to mess it up, because really, realistically, I mean, if you wanted to, or in Florida, you probably could. You can go back after her for damages. Not that it's collectible. I mean, the tenants really don't have the money to, or have the money, but if you really wanted to get a judgment on it for things that she did, or not messy, but punched holes in the wall,
Yeah,
and
damage. Yeah,
damage that mess things up. So
Mhm.
crazy story. That's crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, some of these sellers had a lease with people, and then they still collect rent. And that was almost like something at the complex I'm at, where the seller, the company, sold it to this new company, and the next month they collected the rent. It was by mistake.
Oh
But can you
wow.
imagine a mistake of collecting everybody's rent?
Wow,
When
that's
it
great.
was really the other person. So definitely know that kind of theme for you. Look,
Mhm.
Eric, you got so many valuable stories and information. People, when they watch this, when they watch each clip that we've done, and we're gonna edit it out and cut it up. What are people that watch this? Who are you looking for to reach out to you? And then also tell us, how can people connect with you? I love the YouTube channel Flipping Dirty. I didn't
Yeah.
even see that before, but that's a great name. Flipping Dirty is Eric Parrow's YouTube channel. But tell us all about that. Like, who are you looking for to reach out to you, and where can they find you?
So, man, I would love for all kinds of people to reach out to me. Personally, for me, I would love to grow my available, banks to reach out to that would offer some lending for the types of properties that I get into. I would love to talk to anybody that is thinking about getting into real estate. I've got lots of friends that are always just saying, "Man, I'd love to get into real estate, but I just don't want to be a landlord." Well, guess what? We can use your money on a private mortgage, to a specific property, and basically back up your investment with an asset, a physical asset, and get you some great returns on that without you having to be a landlord. You're basically just a private lender at that point, right? So you're just putting your money out there to work. Your money, your asset is the money itself, and you're looking for a return on it. And whatever that return is, obviously that's something we would have to discuss, and it'd have to make sense and be like, probably as much or more than what you're getting in wherever it's currently invested. But essentially, if you're somebody that just doesn't have the time to be a landlord, doesn't want to mess with owning the real estate itself, don't let the opportunity go to waste. Reach out. Let's put your asset to work in my system and get that producing, because it's way better than anything in stocks and bonds and funds and all that right now. Because I've got a little bit of that myself out there, and it's been stagnant over the
Right.
last 12 months, right? So there's that. Banks, anybody getting involved, starting out, or even that's trying to level up, right? So a lot of these, like I said, go to interests of people trying to get started. And that's great, but I think people that have been in it and are trying to level up a little bit, I would love to talk to those people as well, and kind of offer a little bit of assistance, some ideas or suggestions, and try and help them level up. I've had a lot of people help me level up, and so I want to pass that baton on to the next person for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome stuff. And most importantly, though, they can find you on Facebook. They can find you on YouTube. So it's Eric Parrow on Facebook. Find you on Instagram at Eric's Adventure.
Yeah. So on Instagram, the Eric's Adventure account is mainly, I love to travel and do adrenaline sports, whatever that is, whether it's
Cool.
racing motorcycles or motorcycle adventure travel or surfing or, trying out some paragliding, whatever it is, hiking maybe. I try and do a little bit of everything and have some fun. So that's what that account is mainly about. But my stories on that account, my 24-hour rolling stories, are typically real estate related, because I do a lot more real estate than I do adventure things. So my day to day on my stories is that. So it's kind of fun to follow along on that sometimes. And then some of the weird stuff I get into, like the raccoon cage inside the house, floor to ceiling raccoon cage. I bought that house and cleared out 3 40 cubic yard dumpsters out of that house after the tenants moved out. So you'll get to see stuff like that as it happens. But yeah, I'll answer a message anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, even if you want to email me, eric@lovethisrental.com. So just feel free to reach out. I'm just a normal guy doing normal stuff, honestly. So
Who knows a lot about Pensacola and Oklahoma
a little bit, yeah.
and the banks and all those lenders. So,
I mean, a little bit
hey,
about a few things.
Eric, thanks so much for coming on. You went through so much great stuff. There's so much valuable stuff, different experiences, people that want to go through some of these things, and that will eventually, somebody's going to reach out to you because they definitely have these questions about the banks and then the cash flow. I thought those two examples were fantastic. People always that are trying to get involved are always looking for those things. So
Yeah,
I love having you on. We'll recap. We'll do another one at some point in a year or so, and hear about more of your adventures and all the things that you do. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man, I'd love to reconnect again on one of these interviews for sure. Appreciate you having me on here. Man, I'm excited. Maybe I'm going to get a probate deal at some point down in Florida, and I know exactly who that's going to. So I'd love to do some business with you and kind of keep this exchange going. So it's awesome. I really appreciate being on here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, would love to. I do all the weird stuff, so we'll get to it. I'm ready to connect with you on that stuff. So everybody, again, this is Eric Parrow. He's got his YouTube channel, Flippin' Dirty. You find him on there. He's got great videos and a wealth of information. So anybody that loves these types of videos, you can always check me out on the Al Nicoletti YouTube channel. I'm always on Facebook at Al Nicoletti. I have all these videos, little graphics. Share your stories, comment below, give your side to stuff. And if you like videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And at the end of the day, you're not just going out to find deals, but you are taking massive actions so deals find you. And that is what is the most important. So I will see you all next time on the Al Nicoletti Show on the next episode. See you then.